42 days. Wow. I can't believe it's been 42 days since Shoko was a freak and then sucked on Mikiwa's bloody fingers.
高い天井で育てば背が伸びるというように世界を広く持つことが人を大きくするのだと。そして高校2年の夏休み、私も遠くへ旅に出る。部活の合宿なのだけれど、これも旅には違いない。電車と車を乗り継いで私たちは南の海へ。剣と道着をカバンに詰めて鬼ヶ島を望む岬の山門へ。そこで私が出会うのは我が部を支える内女の子。旅先で知る新たな顔も出会いといえば出会いなのかも。相沢康美。ここよりさらに南から来た目的不明の先住者。ちょっと苦手かもしれない。火や右は神代の剣を携えて神増島へと向かう極意の剣気。かや皿の木に咲く白の中、ひときわ異彩に咲き生える枯れずの赤い椿にも似た琥珀。そして私がたどり着いた夜、互いに惹かれ合うようにナミ。投げ入れられた6つの小石、波紋が重なりあやをなし、まだ見ぬ絵巻を織り上げる。月の満ち欠け、潮の満ち引き、水面を乱す定めの巡り。瑠璃の都にまどろむ竜のいざなう嵐に私は抗う。無限の波はわだつみの鼓動。青い城。ロードするファイルを選んで。ちょっとセーブデータがないわよ。
Hi. Hello, Proger. Hello, Lappy. We're about to get started with Aoi Shiro again. In honor of Proger's stream, which I just finished watching up, the Little Witch in the Woods stream, I decided that I would also be a little witch in the woods, except for that I am in Boston. And I think that I am probably normal sized, but I'm small in the corner here, so for as small as you can tell, I'm actually this size in real life. So let's go ahead and get started and remind ourselves where we are in Aoi Shiro. Last time, which was 2 weeks ago, we continued on with Yasumi's route, where she continued to be a heart condition character with a vaguely ill-defined condition that is becoming more and more convenient for the plot as days go on. We also got through a lot of the plot beats that we've had in the previous route, like deciding that, hey, you know hurricanes? they're not that big of a deal. We don't have to worry about all these school children here when there's a hurricane hitting. We can just stay as long as we want to have nice training time on the beach, because it seems like the weather's fine right now. Let's just hold out and see. And as we know that this is the correct the correct choice, because there is a very big storm coming, but we need to be here for it. So, I mean, otherwise you're not going to get, like, you lose every opportunity at Yuri that you don't take. And apparently for Shoko, being in the midst of a deadly storm is one of those opportunities. So let's continue on Yasumi's route. And remember last time they went to the beach and a lot of other things happened, but largely we just got through a lot of Yasumi being very mysterious and sometimes having dead eyes, which is probably fine. I'm sure that that's not related to her condition, or the fact that it seems like perhaps she and Shoko actually knew each other as small children, and maybe they are more star-crossed than they would initially lead us to believe. I might be able to remember something. I might be able to remember something about what happened to my body. As I neared the Oni stepping stones, something silver flashed in front of my eyes. It would be dangerous to move carelessly, so I kept both of my feet firmly on the ground. I only moved my eyes and searched the area once I realized something had happened. On a rock near the Oni stepping stones was Mikiwa, who had declined Momoko's offer, and Momoko's offer earlier, of course, was to get a swimsuit and go join everyone for fun at the beach. It seems like I had bad timing to come here just as Mikiwa was casting her fishing line. She bent the bow, and with a springy sound, the tip, with a hook at the end, flew into the ocean. Although it didn't have a reel or anything like that, and it was just a simple stick used to fish in a pond, the line traveled out quite far. The reason I came here was because I wanted to take a closer look at the Oni stepping stones. Only Mikiwa and I were both forbidden from going to this place. No one was supposed to be here. This wasn't really a bad time to ask questions, I suppose. The reason Mikiwa was here... What was she doing here? And also, her swordplay. I lost to her. I wanted to combine all of those questions and get straight to the point, but... That was the question I ended up asking. I wouldn't believe that, so I didn't respond. I didn't shake my head or look away either. I just kept staring straight at her. You weren't... Shoko, you weren't staring straight. Shoko never is. Mikiwa gave a sigh as if she couldn't help herself.
剣は神の宿る器だからね。あんたが持ってる雲打ちなんて足元にも及ばないような霊剣新たかな神器真剣なんだけど、それ売ればさぞかしいい値がつくんでしょうね。まあね、そうね、表に出せば国宝級どころか国宝そのものだろうしね。あいにくと鑑定書とか箱書きなんか。
Hello, Myogon. Thank you for joining us. We've just gotten started, so you haven't missed anything. Though, let me know if you need a refresher on where we are in Yasumi's route, and I'll be glad to help. She was looking down on Kumochi, which was like a cheap wooden sword compared to what she was talking about, but those things often appeared as national treasures, too. Yes, I do think that one of the best ways to enjoy Aoi Shiro is to simply let the Yuri wash over you like waves as it comes, because truly knowing the full context, I don't know how much it actually adds to anything. Yes, thinking about it, if this were a weapon made of bronze, just maintaining it would cost quite a lot of money. The sword that was protected for over 800 years, even through Satsuma's invasion and America's occupation, had been stolen. Well, that was a pretty major event. I understood that this really was a big deal to her household.
それはともかく右輪がここにいることとの関連性が見えないんだけど。あれ信じてない？あんまりね。でも和尚の宗派の偉い人とのつながりがあるってことはやっぱり宗教関係なんだ。まあね、宮内庁もびっくりな秘密組織よ。
First, it's a national treasure. Now it's the Imperial Household Agency. She really did bring a lot of things up. Since Mikiwa lowered her voice, I also happened to listen seriously to what she had to say. I wonder if she'd been playing with me from the very start of this conversation. Why would a person chasing an Oni be relaxing and fishing here? Jeez. This is entirely unrelated, but when I was out for a walk yesterday, I saw a sign posted on the street on the side of a building that said, "No loitering, police take notice." And I immediately just parsed this as like, hey, you fucking pigs, don't loiter here. And then I realized once I got home that probably they're saying that no, normal people you can't loiter because the police will notice you. But I like to think that that sign was warning police against loitering, as they are wont to do. I felt a cold spray on my forehead and cheeks. It wasn't salt spray that had leapt out of the ocean, but fragments of water falling from the sky. Shoko, we normally refer to that as rain. The sharp blue glare that appeared past her wide-open eye was like a drawn sword, and she's gone sans mode again. Her serious eyes were mixed in with her joking words. Mikiwa's gaze moved towards the open sea. Inasaka was floating in the water where Mikiwa looked. The only road that connected that island to ours is the only stepping stones. Whether it was a metaphor or not, It was fitting that Migiwa was chasing an Oni by watching over a road allegedly used by Oni. I pushed up my wet bangs, which were annoyingly plastered against my forehead. Migiwa's gaze returned to meet mine. Before dinner at dusk, if the days were short, it'd be dark already, and the monk finished his rounds as he stopped me in the hall. He moved the round fan in his hand in a large gesture. Then the monk, advanced in his years, would be playing the part of the priest in the play. I didn't particularly understand what he wanted from me. Anyways, it seemed to be just fine if I borrowed the monk's fan and waved it around a bit. And so... hand-rolled sushi for dinner. Ah, yes, she was waving the fan around to cool down the fresh rice so that it could be rolled up. The result of my help was to spread the delicious aroma of glittering vinegared sushi rice around. And the large plates on the table were like that you'd find in a high-end restaurant. They were piled high with beautiful sashimi. It had sliced daikon radish that was soaked in water, grated yamaimo, and small pieces of okra mixed in with it. Okra's very good. Okra's a good vegetable. Before rolling the hand rolls, the appetizers were in front of us. The crispy daikon radish and the gummy yamaimo made an interesting contrast in texture. The sharp spiciness and soft sweetness were also another point of comparison. Yes, we're going to go a little bit faster through this part because we've seen this conversation before, in which they discuss the fact that, once again, there are some difficulties in adjusting for these girls to regional Southern Island cuisine, which sometimes has sugar in the soy sauce, or other different sort of intricacies as they're staying here at a Buddhist temple. The Would You Like Dinner and baths were done. Momoko's Genki voice rang out, though only next day's prep and sleep were left ahead of us. Besides Nami, who wouldn't wake up early, no one was sleeping, and there were no neighbors to bother, so a slightly loud voice was perfectly alright. Blood becomes knowledge. When one's hungry or something and the stomach robs the head of blood, you won't have any good ideas. There were many people who were tired out from the afternoon and who wouldn't be staying up late tonight. Though I'd like it if there were at least some effective countermeasures that could help Ayashiro remain sleeping soundly and safe from the mysterious ghost girl that had attacked her. Momoko held up Kumochi, which had barely escaped being used to smash a watermelon. She waved it through the air, testing it. Compared to Momoko, who was raggedly breathing, Ayashiro, the only victim here, was fearful and lowered her eyebrows. If it were indiscriminate, then the next time it appeared it might go after Ayashiro again. However, Momoko clutched her head as she lay down on the floor quietly. When she raised it back up again, her enthusiastic smile had returned. You know, as we go through the playthroughs of this game, and as I relive the nostalgia that I had from 2008 and 2009, truly I do think Momoko might be like top 3, top 2 characters. I don't think she's my favorite because I do think that's Kohaku, but like, we haven't met Kohaku properly yet. So, honestly, I do love Momoko. Someone who couldn't see it only would, Someone who couldn't see it could only wake up people who were having a nightmare. Still, offering to keep watch, Momoko's eyes showed spirit. But still, I couldn't let Momoko do such a task all by herself. If Momoko and I took turns, we'd be able to last until the afternoon, where we could take a nap easily. We might not need anyone else's help. Unusual for Momoko, she looked down and raised her eyes up at me with a vague gesture that somehow resembled what Yasumi does to her sometimes. Well, I guess that was fine. PowerPoint wipe transition. Like the sound of the waves back and forth, the regular breathing of the sleeping girls filled the darkened room. The countless waves piled onto each other, making a single beat, just like the sleeping breaths of the people around us. Mixed in there was also the healthy breathing that shouldn't have been quite so present.
想通りといえば予想通りだけど
Since she played that much and ate so much, Momoko would naturally want to rest. Lying against the wall with Komochi in hand, Momoko might continue to stand guard in her dreams, but... no, with such a disheveled, sleeping face, that probably wasn't possible.
まったくだから交代制にしろって言ったのに
Ah, a momentary pause as I open my pill container and take my nightly bimbo pill. Revoking Momoko's exemption from the morning exercises, I helped put her to sleep on the futon. She said she'd fall asleep if she lay in the futon, but she'd placed it out anyway and moved her light body onto the unused mattress. Jeez. With this unsightly state she was in, there hadn't been any point to what she did earlier. I took away Komochi. Though I did that and carried her over, she didn't wake up and swing at me, so she was really sound asleep. Now, should we, everyone, continue monitoring the situation or go to sleep ourselves? It is once again choice time. Remember that you can place the pound symbol for continue watch, or you can say sleepy time. And remember that you have unlimited votes. Now, in terms of the correct path here, it's not necessarily too strict, but I do think that it would be a little bit less interesting to just fall asleep. So, as Lappy suggests, let's continue to keep watch. Since I'm already awake, I'll just continue to stand guard with Komochi in hand. Though my eyelids were closed, I still wasn't sleepy enough to quite nod off. What happened last night, after I caused the Tokusaki no Tsubaki to scatter, my whole body was filled with a strange sort of energy. It resembled the feeling I got after I drank an energy drink that Senpai gave me at last year's school festival. The red Tsubaki might drain energy to increase its vitality and prevent itself from withering. If it drained energy from other living things, then it's as if it were a... you know...
私やっぱり何かおかしい
The problem wasn't the energy that filled my body. I understood that within the hilt of Komochi, which I grasped in my hand, there was something special. Though it was the night, the eyes still brought them the most information in the body. If I closed my eyes, then I could sense some sort of deep presence, like the way a predator sharpens its sense of smell to taste prey. It wasn't coming from Komochi or Yasumi, or sleeping next to me, or Nami. In the hall, there was a presence. I didn't hear the old planks of the floor in the hall creak. I thought it might come in handy, or I thought the presence might come in, so I tightened my grip on Komochi, but it passed by the room without entering. I thought I should make sure, so I got up quietly and put my hand on the middle handles of the sliding door. I somehow understood that I wouldn't bump heads with someone just as I opened it. I quietly slid the door open and stuck my face out. I saw someone's back as they turned the corner down the hall. That suspicious shadow, which had been pliant, both pliant, shoulders bare, had the air of a predatory cat, was... Migiwa. Migiwa was dressed in the same as she was in the afternoon. Nya. 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 She was holding a long bag that resembled what was used to carry our shinai. Jimmy air, Jimmy air. Where was she planning to go at this time of night? Oh, a time like this, in the middle of the night, in the dead of night, at the third quarter of the hour of the ox, when even the flora slept. I was staying up and keeping watch because something like a ghost might appear and attack Ayashiro. It's been about half a day since that conversation. I wonder if she was once again at the road near the ocean leading from Unosaka to Onigashima. If she were at the Oni stepping stones, then this wasn't really a joke, and Mikiwa really was the type of person she said she was. Which, of course, we know that she is the type of person she said she was, because we just did Mikiwa's route before this. In some ways, this game is structured in a way that sort of favors a sort of progression. But it's not really too firm about that. There is a lot of redundancy to make sure that you kind of understand at least 70% of the story, whether you pick Mikiwa's route or Yasumi's route first. But once we get to the later routes, you'll start to see things change significantly because those are locked behind late progress flags in Mikiwa and Yasumi's routes. I'd heard from my grandpa that in China, people thought of Oni as the souls of those who have died. Personally, I thought that dead people were ghosts, and I thought of Onis as inhuman things, like spirits, but in the West, Dracula was a vampire raised from the dead. In other words, he was a ghost with a physical body, wasn't he? And then, if Mikiwa belonged to an organization that dealt with Oni, the ghost girl that attacked Ayashiro, perhaps she would be able to help? Alright. Now, we have a much more tenuous decision. Do we follow Mikiwa? Or do we remain here and stand watch? This one, I believe, does not necessarily have a distinct effect on Yasumi's route, but it will, of course, show us different scenes either way. So, I leave this up to you, and in fact, stand watch to be closer with Yasumi. Well, let's keep a safe there, just in case. As if something had taken a favorable turn during our conversation, Mikiwa moved for an instant, but if I chased after her and got far away from here, then that would ruin the point of keeping watch. And also, what if... I mean, really, it was just a what if. There was the possibility that I, myself, was the ghost. Because of the amount of circumstantial evidence, I worried if I was the ghost, it might be best to stay up all night. But what if it was as I feared and I was the ghost? While I was asleep, did I somehow leave my body or something besides my body and go to attack other people while I was sleepwalking? I tightly gripped Kumochi in my hand. It was the virtuous wooden sword that was said to be effective against a ghost which had no body. Hello, Bismuth. I'm glad that your libidinal energy is strong and healthy and manifesting today. The smooth feel of the wood had no wear on it at all. It fit perfectly in my hand and felt very familiar. I wondered if the ghost that might be within me was afraid of its mysterious power. Something heavy within its center went past the sweat in the palm of my hand, and I felt as if it were slowly entering me. I breathed out to get that feeling off of my chest. That must be my imagination. I'd been gripping the sword so hard that my hands were white. I relaxed my grip, and the air blowing through the gap swept away the sweat on my palm. Fellas, do you ever just hold a wooden sword so strongly? If, like Azoth had said, the sword is a mirror that reflects the heart, then this heavy feeling was that of me doubting myself. Meaning, I wanted proof that I wasn't the ghost, and I wanted a ghost other than myself to appear. Ah, yes. Yes, Vector. I didn't think at all about what sort of damage would occur if a ghost actually showed up. I felt something like a stare, and I turned my attention from the inside to the outside of the room. Don't tell me. Is it the ghost? I adjusted my grip on Komochi, holding my breath as I searched the room with my eyes, my ears, my sense of touch. Nami sat up from her futon at some point, and I met her large blue eyes with my own. Though she couldn't talk, I expected some sort of reaction. However, Nami didn't nod or blink. Like an automated doll, she shook her head from side to side in an unnatural, glassy motion. Her lapis lazuli eyes, that forgot to blink, looked not towards the ocean at the rear of the temple, but towards the mountains. Yes, the motion was glassy. So, again, as I think I've mentioned previously, so this is the fan translation from 2008, and the reason we're using this is because the official port, sadly, was almost illegible, both in terms of its translation and because its formatting was actually kind of a nightmare to read, with a lot of text just completely left off of the screen and unavailable to us. So we are using a fan translation from 2008, and I think they did admirably, but of course, you know, people did this in their spare time and weren't being paid for it. So that's why we also see things like, of course, Genki Momo. Genki being untranslated is actually, I believe, a very 2008 thing. I don't know that fan subbers, for all of the quirks that, you know, fan translations have these days, I don't know that people leave Genki untranslated very often anymore. That was definitely of the same era that we were talking about glomping people. A whisper like a sigh leaked out of her mouth. It was as if Nami were possessed by something. As if the puppet strings that didn't allow her eyes to even blink were suddenly cut. Nami's eyelids dropped over, and she laid back down on the futon. Her posture while she was sitting up had been stiff, but now she had a calm, regular breathing as if nothing had happened at all. I turned her slender arm a bit and gently lied her down and readjusted her posture on the futon. I wondered just how much time had passed in this dark room. I was waiting for some strange occurrence or of dawn. My eyes had gotten used to the darkness, and the moonlight filtering through the paper screen doors seemed almost bright to me. In truth, it wasn't enough to bother anyone sleeping, but it did make walking around the room inconvenient. Of course, the washed-out colors in the thin darkness made it hard to distinguish shapes very well. I heard the sound of gentle breathing, the solitaries rustling, the house creaking, and the far-off sound of the waves. It was a sound that fluctuated with countless harmonious noises combined within, and could not quite act like the hands of a clock. The second hand of the wall clocked ticks, 86420. 86,420 times in a day. But that was far too much detail, and I couldn't grasp just how many times it had moved in the span of this moment. Of course, if I checked the backlight on my cell phone, I could know the exact time, but time seemed to lag during these quiet hours, and if I checked the clock, I might be disappointed. Even if I knew the time, nothing would truly change. As I interrupted the useless thoughts brought about by my own boredom, I felt as if the temperature in the room had suddenly dropped. Though I didn't know if it just felt that way or if some actual physical phenomenon had taken place. A feeling of lethargy attacked me at the same time as the cold air that gave me goosebumps. It was different from the sleepy feeling that you get when you haven't had enough sleep. It was similar to the tired feeling you get after taking a swim as a child. If I entrusted myself to that feeling, I might sleep soundly until morning. But if I did that, then nothing would get resolved. In the morning, if someone else was attacked, then I'd continue to suspect myself and replay the same troubled thoughts that plagued me today. I tapped my cheeks and made a noise. Was this why Ayashiro was feeling poorly? Was this why nobody woke up? I'd heard that when ghosts appear, they're accompanied by a physical drop in temperature. I raised my voice to fight off the sleepiness and put my hand on the virtuous kumochi made of the tokusaki no tsubaki. In order to discern whether something out of the ordinary was really happening, I strained my eyes and tried to stand. I should have put strength into my legs and the arms supporting me on the floor, but I couldn't move them. My lips were able to move, though. I moved them right and left. It seems that I could still do that. But I couldn't move my body. I wondered if this would be something like sleep paralysis. It didn't feel like a huge weight was crushing me, but rather as if I had been fixed in place by plaster that had hardened all around my limbs. If I tried to resist, it would drain my stamina. If I didn't want to uselessly resist, it'd be fine to just leave it be and fall asleep. But the paralysis was just the introduction, and something was going to happen from here on out. Though Ayashiro's statement wasn't a lie, it might not be entirely truthful. She might have been drowsy, and even now I was still half in doubt. Though, since some strange phenomena had occurred just now, the ghost being the reason for her poor condition also seemed fairly likely. And right now, I was the only one awake and the only one with Komochi in hand who could counter the ghost. Though I was in a condition where I couldn't particularly do anything. I clenched my molars and uttered a groan. Someone's pained moans floated through the air. It might be from someone who had just woken up and found out they couldn't move. The weak cries of resistance were coming from Ayashiro. Though I was paralyzed, I could still move my eyes and mouth and other places which were not completely frozen. As a thin sweat, which I couldn't see, formed, I turned my head towards her. There was some sort of vaguely glowing shape on top of the sleeping Ayashiro. Watching it and straining my eyes, I could see that it was human-shaped. I recognized that it had the shape of a long-haired young girl. Like I'd heard this morning, it was transparent, but there was no possibility this was someone playing a prank. Just in the way that a vampire in the movie sucks blood, its mouth was buried in Ayashiro's long, thin neck, peeking out from under her pajamas. When I checked this morning, there wasn't even a mosquito bite sort of redness, so there wasn't any physical penetration by a fang. but its throat was moving as if it were greedily drinking the blood from her neck. Ayashiro let out feverish moans. Under the pale moonlight, I could see her skin lose its color. Something was being drained from Ayashiro. It most likely wasn't blood, but some sort of spiritual energy which the eye couldn't see. So, a ghost which drained that should be called Kyuseki instead of Kyuketsuki, which, yes. So not only do we have to now turn back the Yuri Vampirism Incident counter, we have to turn back the Yuri Penetration Incident counter. I don't recall the exact etymology here, but Kyuketsuki and Kyuseki, I think, refer to, like, quite literally the thing that is being sucked. So, you know, something other than blood being sucked. In contrast to Ayashiro, who was losing color, the Kyuseki, or ghost vampire, was becoming more solid, and I could see it without straining my eyes. What if it became solid enough to have a physical body? I wondered if it would voraciously tear apart Ayashiro's thin throat and drain her dry of blood, the fountain of her life. As if I would allow that to happen. I wanted to rush in and immediately drive away the vampire on top of Ayashiro, but my body didn't listen to me, and the short distance was still extremely far. I put strength into the hand-gripping Komochi, but I didn't expect that much from the miraculous virtue of the wooden sword. Because the source of its virtue, the Tokusaki no Tsubaki, had scattered until it was nothing right in front of my eyes. If that was the case, then I had to rely on my own strength to free myself. In order to increase my fighting spirit to the maximum, I slowly took a deep breath. At the same time, I filled my body with strength and yelled. In the palm of my hand, Komochi pulsated. Something raged through my body. That torrent rushed through and shredded the invisible ropes that bound me. The something which went through my body traveled to Komochi, which I was holding in my left hand, leaving me and then dissipating. A sense of lethargy greater than before. As if I'd just run a full-on sprint, my heart pumped blood like a broken dam, but I couldn't afford to collapse here. Goodbye and good night, Meowgon. I hope you enjoyed. Please join us again for more Yuri and more vampirism, hopefully. Finally, I regained control of my body. Standing up, I put my left hand on the hilt of Komochi and drew the wooden sword. I held Komochi in front stance and fixed the point of the sword and my gaze on the vampire. I gathered my fighting spirit at the same instant I stepped forward. I struck at the body, aiming low to hit the vampire. In case I missed, I swung Komochi diagonally so it wouldn't hit Ayashiro. I felt a slight impact. I did feel some sort of impact, but the mysterious feeling was also like hitting thick air that was even lighter than water. I absorbed the rush of my blow up with the lower half of my body and jumped back to avoid any counterattack from the vampire. More than the definitive feel of an impact, it was dangerous to stay near a foe like this. Since the Kyuseki didn't vanish, it must have quite a bit of power. Letting out a pain groan, the vampire left Ayashiro and faced me. It was a long-haired ghost girl. To be precise, a ghost vampire. But beyond that, I couldn't really tell anything outright. The long hair flowed down, and the places it didn't cover were half transparent and faintly growing. Its face was indiscernible. I once again held Komochi in a front stance and carefully kept my distance. It didn't answer. The only thing I heard was a hungry, agonizing, revolting moan, and that vampire wanted to relieve its hunger. It reached its transparent arm toward me. Using Kumochi, I readjusted my front stance and prepared to attack it. But Kumochi's attack had passed through the opponent's body, so the opposite was also true. The vampire didn't stop when Kumochi struck its chest and continued heading towards me. When the tip passed through its chest, I felt resistance, but it wasn't enough to stop the vampire, which had no physical form. As the tip went out of its back, the vampire advanced and reached its pale, transparent, phosphorescent hand towards me. It was already that close. Reflexively, I held Kumochi into a defensive position, but since I didn't reach with my attack, it also shouldn't have been able to reach me. I shouldn't receive any contact. It should pass right through me, right? As the cold arm reached through Kumochi, it didn't scatter but maintained its power and attacked my entire body. At that instant, I felt the freezing ethereal atmosphere on my skin. I couldn't tell whether it was hot or cold. It just hurt. The shocking pain from where it touched me spread throughout my body. As if it wanted to receive payment with interest for my attack, the heat was robbed from my body in an instant. Reflexively, my muscles contracted at the dangerous touch on my skin and I jumped back to keep my distance, but even after that, the blood circulating within me felt like cold sherbet, and my body continued to ache from the inside. Was the reason my legs were trembling because of the way I staggered when I landed? Was the shivering due to the cold? Or due to my fear? The thing shaped like a girl in front of my eyes was truly a vampire, an oni that drained spiritual energy just by touching it. I seemed about to fall since the legs that supported my body had their energy drained and had become weak. In contrast, the vampire that stole my spiritual energy became more solid, and I could see it clearly now. Kumochi wasn't able to give it a fatal wound, and like a bad prank, it only stopped with injuring its spiritual body. There was almost nothing stopping the injured vampire anymore. It might not even stop at the level of Shiro this morning, whose body was only fatigued. Worst comes to worst, it wouldn't stop with just me and everyone here. I yelled in a spirited voice, but no one batted an eyelash and remained asleep, under the unnatural, magically induced sleep. And that's when my spiritual energy also ran out. I stumbled over a futon and fell down. It didn't really hurt, but my body didn't have the ability to get up immediately. And then the solid hand of the vampire touched my shoulder, draining spiritual energy from me. Perhaps it had almost gained physical form because its hand didn't pass through my body. It wasn't like the previous attack where my spiritual energy was violently sucked away, but it slowly, gradually began to consume me. The cold induced by its touch, and even the will I had to resist were both being drained away along with my energy. I was caught within the grasp of the vampire. A cold sigh brushed against my neck. Whether it was because it was more effective to drain energy or not, it leaned towards my exposed neck, not covered by my shirt. The vampire put its lips near where the largest bloodline lay, beneath thin skin, circulating life. The cold permeated even my carotid artery and ran up through my neck. All that the blood vessels in my brain filled with ice and froze my thinking. My consciousness felt as if it were wrapped in a white fog. People who had mishaps in the snowy mountains would finally fall asleep and die. I wondered if it felt like this. If that were the case, this would not be a Nure Onna, but a Yuki Onna. I couldn't go to sleep like this. Thinking that, I dug my nails into the palm of the hand, but it was almost to the point where I couldn't feel pain anymore. Lips touched my neck. That soft coldness made the soft hairs on my neck stand up, like standing in high altitude or When an injection pierces a blood vein, my body, from my knees to my thighs to my tailbone, trembled. I couldn't tell whether it was because I couldn't gather any energy or because I'd gathered too much. I could hear the soft sound of its throat swallowing as if it were drinking something. I didn't feel the pain of fangs breaking through my skin, so I didn't think it was drinking my blood, but perhaps it had already bitten through the skin and I just couldn't feel the pain anymore. I wondered if ghosts also needed to breathe, since it removed its face slightly from my neck and I saw the vampire's eyes peeking out from between its hair. Wait, this face. Maybe I'd been drained of plenty energy because those eyes didn't have the same frightening presence as before. More than that, I felt as if I'd seen those faintly glowing white face somewhere before. My consciousness ended there. Plunged endlessly towards the depths. A bad ending where you get killed by a vampire. Now, time to go back to that save that I made. Wait! Why'd the game close? Well, we've had a momentary crash. One moment while I start back up again.
Success.
There we are. Yes, so now let's follow Migiwa and see what happens there. As I was thinking, Migiwa had completely vanished. Well, Lappy, I won't reveal those sorts of things just yet. Trust me when I say that this game will it will spare no words to explain. Or I suppose that means the opposite of what I meant. They will spare no effort in explaining. But I had a clue as to where she was going. And if she wasn't there, then my basis for asking her for help was weaker. It's alright, Lappy. Many choices can get us killed. In this way, this game is much like life. There are girls who are gay, you can die, and sometimes vampires will attack you. It is truly very much like life. After looking around the room once more to make sure there weren't any strange presences, I headed down the hall with Kumochi in hand. Creak, creak. The floorboards warped and swayed under my footsteps. I went past the courtyard and down the long steps to the ocean filled with the smell of sea salt. I came to the beach, where I'd also come on the first night here when the sound of the waves made it such that I couldn't sleep. It was completely changed from the afternoon, where everyone had played in the blue, glittering ocean together. And it gave me the strong impression of being a boundary between this world and the next, a place where something might come to visit us. The sands were the border between such a world, and in the past, it really used to be a road to Onigashima, to another world. Oh, forgive me, sleepy girl syndrome. I wondered if Migiwa was keeping watch over this forbidden place where there's a line in the water stretching out from this world. The sands grasped the bottom of my shoes as I started walking towards that place. I headed towards the rocks and even more difficult footing as I walked across the sand. Just as I thought, there was a huge difference between coming here in the afternoon and coming here now at night. The rocks started out big as curbside pebbles, but gradually became large boulders, casting tall shadows in the pale darkness. In contrast, the stepping stones, which stretched towards the island and were only faintly visible. As I came to that place, Mikiwa greeted me with words meaning, what an impatient person. Geez, just which one of us was impatient? Mikiwa didn't remove her gaze from the sea. In other words, she was searching for a presence and talked without confirming my identity. At this place and at this time, she probably thought it was the Oni who had stolen the sword. Turning around and calling my name, her voice was full of both disappointment and relief. Like I thought, Mikiwa was waiting for the Oni that should pass by this road, as she mentioned last time. I didn't know whether it was the Oni that Mikiwa was chasing, but I explained that it had also held a grudge against people. As if she wanted to slay it, Mikiwa's narrowed eyes had a dangerous glint about them. She looked past my shoulders towards Shoshinji. Slay it. I wasn't able to think of a way to ensure the safety of the team, but I guess an Onikiri would be able to do such things. If the ghost were a dangerous existence that had nothing to do with us, then it was fine if Mikiwa ended it like that, but... what if I... Really, it was just a what if, but... I looked down and stared at my own hand. I looked at that hand which had caused the red Tsubaki flowers to scatter. I didn't want to believe it, and wanted to think that there was some other spirit-draining Oni out there, but if I was, then there was a possibility that I myself was the Oni draining life from others, while I was asleep. Ah, that is unfortunate, Bismuth. I hope that resetting fixes it for you. I hope to see you back momentarily. While I was asleep, did I somehow leave my body or something besides my body and attack other people while sleepwalking? I wondered if Mikiwa would slay me in that case. Under the moonlight, her steel blue eyes suddenly looked frightening. I wondered if the strong wind held by Urashima's festival was what caused me to shiver. As I remained silent, Mikiwa might be trying to figure out who the culprit was. Or maybe the culprit was close to us, so she couldn't immediately answer that she'd like to cut it down. That wasn't me, but... Something that has the form of a human, but isn't human. When I first saw her, the impression of Nami I got was also... Oh, excuse me. I couldn't say I disbelieved the possibility that just because a child had a mysterious presence, she might not be human. But I didn't really want to believe that... I'm more likely to believe that I myself was the culprit than believing that Nami was the Oni who attacked people. I'm sure she would appreciate that, Lappy. So she's saying that it started out with attraction. There could be other reasons, though, for disguising oneself, besides returning a favor. And she's saying that more than kindness changing to ill will, it was more likely that malice was the intention from the start. Yes, Crab Ghost Girl. It was a female vampire that appeared near the ocean.
岸で出会った親切な人に少しの間子供を抱いていてくださいって頼んで預けて海に消えるわけ。すると今度は牛鬼が出て襲いかかってくるわけよ。逃げようとしても抱いた子供が重たい石に化けていて手に吸い付いて離れない。
The Usona, partner to the Ushioni, turns herself into the stone child and is able to enter one's defenseless embrace. Using that story as a comparison point, you could ridicule us for not really doubting the mysterious Nami and caring for her so readily.
ちなみに牛鬼を捕らえた別の話では翌日見ると椿の古根になっていたって話が。捕らえた相手が木の根だなんてまるで忍者の代わりにね。椿？
I couldn't give a proper response. Migiwa, who was suspicious of Nami, looked as if she had suddenly thought of something.
安姫様が植えた床先の椿にも牛の鬼が封印されてたわよね。あったの？
It was the Oni formed from the grudge of the Oni king who had been defeated at Urashima.
あら？もしかすると本気で相当怪しいわけ？
I wonder... Was Migiwa talking about watching over the Oni stepping stones that led to Urashima? Or about the Oni she was chasing?
放っておくとまずいんじゃ。
Migiwa stopped that line of conversation and looked around at her surroundings.
おささ、霊の話をしてると霊が寄ってくるって聞いたことない？まあ一応。
The ghost stories during the test of courage yesterday were for that very purpose of confirming the ghost. Last night, things ended without revealing anything, but it seems like this wasn't the case now.
おさと鬼の話なんかしてたせいで鬼がかかってきちゃったじゃない。
With those words, I closed my eyes and searched for a presence. At some point, without me noticing, we'd been surrounded by countless things. Mingyu had called them Oni, and it did seem like they were something inhuman. They were more indistinct than a human, like crude drawings by a small child where the details had been left out. Hello, Bismuth. I'm glad that you've returned. Like a human form melted together with heat and chemicals, it had a warped, murky shape. And those presences weren't just at the beach and the rocks. There were countless of them in the dangerous seas of Unasaka.
本命なら大歓迎なんだけど。
Migiwa bit her pole as she said that.
過去の相手はしたくなかったのよね。
With a sharp sound, the fishing line flew forward, glittering silver in the moonlight of it stretched taut straight ahead. One end of the silvery line was attached to the end of the fishing pole, while the other was connected to the water dark at night. Along with a spray of water, a face poked out from beneath the waves. Like a bicycle reflector, a pair of fierce red lights shined in the ocean, visible even to me in the dark. That was, without a doubt, a face. With long ears that looked like horns and glittering blood-red eyes, it was not the face of a human. At one end of Migiwa's line was neither a person nor a monkey. It didn't have the horns, but it would be appropriate to call it an Oni.
これは昨日の。おさ、見たことあるんだ。
It was the same thing that had caught my eye during the test of courage. Next to me, Migiwa did something I couldn't quite see. And then, of course, as always, the Oni talk in complicated mathematical function formula language. Maybe she threw something small that I couldn't see because there was a slicing sound and the Oni gave a short scream. Oh, once again, sleepy girl syndrome strikes me. The silvery line that shone in the dark snapped and disappeared along with the head of the Oni, which I could no longer see. But that wasn't the end of it. If I had estimated correctly about the presence in the area, there wasn't just one Oni, and we were, in fact, surrounded. Splash. Splash. The sound of the waves didn't dissipate. Not sure why. But with the receding waves at the stepping stones, small Oni appeared. Splish. Splash. If I turned around in the darker than night shadows of the rocks, there were one, two, no more than that. Many, many pairs more of red eyes. 4, 8, 16. Looking at those Oni's eyes, Mikiwa casually threw aside her pole and picked up another thing at her side. Yes, the taxonomy of Oni and yokai, and then also just a wide variety of things really, really comes through. It's something that I don't even see in other sort of paranormal or horror visual novels that have this sort of setting. A long stick of uniform thickness. It was around 150 centimeters and vermilion like a torii gate. Definitely not a fishing pole. As if she knew that the rod would see rough use, both ends of it were reinforced with metal. It resembled Nyoibo, wielded by Son Goku. Too short for a rod fighting, and too long for a cane. It was a strange length. Indeed, Mikiwa's strap. Mikiwa easily started swirling the rod, just as an ill-mannered kid swirls a pin around in their fingers. The rushing sound of wind grew louder. Spinning to the right, spinning to the left, forward, behind, in every direction. The rotation didn't stop, but seemed to get faster. Because of the speed, Mikiwa's glossy pole created an image of the perfect circle that resembled a red plate of a full moon. With that red disc swirling around her, acting like both sword and shield, Mikiwa's steel-blue gaze glared at the short Oni. Many type of kappa. I see. I understand. Though they had neither shells nor dishes on their head, they came from the ocean and seemed to be palmate. Not as small as a child, they were short. However, looking at their limbs and muscles, they seemed strong, like a sumo wrestler. Now that you mentioned it, they didn't look entirely unlike kappa. If you counted them, there were a variety of yokai with similar appearances and dispositions. Morio. She stopped swirling the pole that was cutting through the air and held it straight by her side. In an instant, the end of the pole stretched out and grabbed the Morio that was at the vanguard, holding it in midair. The speed and weight of the kappa-like Oni was fixed on its midsection, as it was held up in the air by the middle end of the pole. Yeah, I do like when she uses her Sans Undertale powers. With a shout and a sweep to the side, it crumbled like a clay doll that hadn't yet hardened. The Morio turned into something like black mud, breaking into big clumps and pieces which crumbled away. The now black mud-like Morio lost its shape and turned into a fine ash scattering in the wind. Beside the footprints, which would disappear when they dried, and the others surrounding us, there was no trace of its existence. She explained that it wasn't a contradiction to be both a kappa and a shikigami. Her turn now. She turned towards the Morio. Indeed, Bismuth. And you might wonder, is all this taxonomy leading up to some grand revelation, or is it like thematic in some way? And I suppose slightly, somewhat. There are like a couple small things. Yes. In fact, allow me to do that presently, since I do also need to reset the vampirism counter, as we saw earlier in the stream today. Kosinyudo, the boss of the kappa, was like a prominent figure who is said to be one like that. Migiwa implied that there were Morio also not like that. She made her way through the crowd of them. The tip of the pole was at her feet, the locus of the pole at her body, as it spun around in a circle. I thought that she had moved, but at some point she returned to her starting position. Her next movement was even faster than before. Like she explained, the arm stretched out. She turned without moving her upper body and at the same time mercilessly struck it down. It was the movement she used to dodge my one-headed strike this afternoon. The vermilion full moon slammed into the ground, and it wasn't hidden by a black smoke, but continued to shine. It was more of a fight scene than I expected, and her dance didn't stop as it kept defeating Morio. As the Morio kept appearing, Migiwa crushed them with the vermilion pole like a windmill grinding wheat, while she continued to explain. I'm so endeared by the fact that she's dropping Asimov references in addition to the taxonomy in the middle of this fight scene. Kon was the spiritual energy that supported the soul. Paku was the spiritual energy that supported the body. So these Morio didn't have the Kon and were like puppets that only moved when ordered, similar to automatons. And there we have it. I believe that you can now see. Yes, that may very well be Everyday Lappy. It will simply be that each day that we stream, we will reset the counter again and again and again. I too have read the taxonomy, but I do not believe that I will remember it either. You see, there are a variety of terms. Quite a variety of terms. I do not think that we will ever truly make it through all of these. No one would blame you for not knowing the glossary of this game. Since it wasn't a true living thing, it didn't need to hold back. I held the sword up high and swung down with all my might. I dodged the arm that extended as I swung, but I wasn't able to completely dodge it and it grazed me. Even then, I didn't stop my downward swing. The heavy impact from Komochi slowly traveled up my arm. It was like hitting thick rubber. As the thing gasped its last breath, the feeling suddenly changed. Just like the one Migiwa defeated, it turned into something like dust and disappeared. And that feeling of impact suddenly vanished along with it. Like missing a step on the stairs, that unexpected change caused me to stumble and broke my stance. The Morio that attacked at that instant was defeated by Migiwa. She didn't lose her calm, and right before it touched me, she struck it with her pole and turned it to dust. Perhaps she wanted to take a break because Migiwa stopped her constant spinning and walked up behind me. As if protecting each other, we stood back to back and faced the ring of Morio. I asked the question while I fended off the Morio's extended arm. Komochi was a virtuous wooden sword created from the Tokusaki no Tsubaki. If you believe the legend, then for the Tokusaki no Tsubaki, which sealed the Oni King's grudge against small fry like this, well, even with the virtuous Komochi, just hitting it once wasn't enough to defeat it, and I needed to use more than one strike. Even Mikiwa was a little amazed as she turned and looked around the sea. She seemed to imply that it was rare for that many Morio to appear, and something important might have occurred just now. This was Mikiwa's job, but for a novice such as myself, to fight against so many, I was lucky to come away with only light scratches. So she was saying that Morio, which don't have red blood, really are small fry. Mikiwa should have been able to answer. I only really knew the gist of things. The Morio are Shikigami that are being controlled by someone. Mikiwa is chasing after the Oni that stole the sword, protected by her family. But I didn't really understand the connection between the two of them. How were these pieces connected in time and place? Or did those two have any connection at all? No. That shouldn't be the case. And there was also one more thing. If the ghost girl with long hair were connected to the Matamu, the grudge of the Oni King, then it should be here, or... Since I was attacked by Morio and in fear for my life, I'd forgotten that I'd come here to exterminate Oni. I'd come here to ask for help with from Mikiwa, who was chasing an Oni, right? It's been quite a while since I left the room. Alright. Now, we have another pivotal choice. I'm going to reveal to you that there is one correct option here, and two that are less correct. For the sake of expedience, I am going to go with Lappy's suggestion once again, and ask Mikiwa for help. Lappy, don't worry. I trust your judgment. I realized something crucial. I didn't even wait for Mikiwa's response. Turning on my heel, I started running back. I understood that Mikiwa needed to watch over the stepping stones, and that the waves dashed against them. But we also needed Mikiwa's strength over there, at the temple. Since I was able to defeat the small fry Morio, I might be able to do something myself with Komochi in hand. Sadly, Shoko, that is not the case. But if it was as Mikiwa guessed, and the ghost girl and Matamu were related somehow, just like the Uso-onna and Ushi-onna were, and such a dangerous existence like the grudge of the Oni King was right there next to everyone, we'd have to deal with that somehow. So I needed Mikiwa's help, since she was knowledgeable about the Oni and definitely stronger than me. The Morio interrupted while we were talking, and it wasn't good to leave Mikiwa, so I'd held on to my sense of the crisis around us. Mikiwa mentioned that it'd be fine to remove the source of the problem, and though logical, was an alarming way to solve the matter. And though she suspected Nami, whose origins were unknown, I had a mysterious conviction that it wasn't Nami, so I didn't hesitate in asking Mikiwa for help on the matter. Mikiwa ran up to me while I was running with all my might. We went past the beach and up the long stairs, and climbing through the dark mountain, which was surrounded by the Saal forest. That scenery wasn't much different than normal, but for some reason the air felt heavy. Just before I put my hand on the metal handle to the slide door, I reflexively stopped. I felt a presence in the room. There was something there. Something had woken up in that room, and now I noticed that the air around me was unnaturally cold. I didn't know whether it was just a natural phenomenon or the temperature dropping, but it was cold enough to give me goosebumps. It was chilly, or perhaps better to call it an ethereally frigid atmosphere. Robbing the body of heat and energy, it left a sluggish and sleepy feeling in its place. Was this why Ayashiro was feeling so poorly lately? Was this also why no one woke up? It still wasn't that bad, but I hadn't calmed down from the excitement from earlier, and I was hypersensitive. A dull person might not have noticed this. Whether Migiwa was dull or something else, more resilient, she put her hand on the door in place of me as if there was nothing wrong. Though she acted like there wasn't anything wrong, her hard voice indicated that she acknowledged something in the room. She opened the door smoothly. The ethereal fog touched my skin, and a power stronger than before wrapped around my mind, causing it to go blank. If I entrusted myself to it, I would definitely continue to sleep soundly until morning. It's probably like last night, and the night before, when I didn't even know something had woken up here, and it slept soundly through until dawn. I clenched my molars together and tried to fight off the ethereal fog, which made me lethargic. Even if I fell asleep, Migiwa was here, so she'd probably take care of it, but I couldn't act so irresponsibly. I gripped Komochi hard and stood at vigil. The only light was the moon shining through the screens, and inside the room there was something darker than inside, glowing faintly. As if the heat of the moonlight had been stolen by the ethereal fog, the faintly glowing blue-white thing was... Her eyes narrowed to look like the blade of a knife as she held her pole in both hands and declared that she saw a ghost. Now that its existence was proven, I was frightened by how defenseless we'd been up until now, though I was a little relieved that it turned out not to be me. The location of the ghost, a Kyuseki, meaning one that drains spiritual energy, was... It was next to where Ayashiro's futon was laid out. I put strength into the grip I had on Komochi. I held Komochi in a fighting stance and entered the room, taking no excuses and striking out. Because of the high ceiling, I could swing with all my might. That's why I tried to hit a vital area and aimed at a side strike at the vampire's head, where it was hovering low above Ayashiro. In my mind, I visualized a strike path where only the vampire would be hit. My body moved just as I visualized. There was just a light feeling of impact, but not even so much as a strong wind as Komochi pierced the vampire's body. That's why it couldn't be touched by normal things, and vice versa. Migiwa said this as she stepped into the room. I didn't think there was anything miraculous in a metal bat. Well, obviously, you've not played Higurashi. There are many miraculous things about a metal bat. She squinted her left eye and opened her right, making an unbalanced expression. One eye had the power to see things not of this world, which she used to look at Komochi as I was holding it. And then her gaze turned back toward the vampire. Like Ayashiro and Momoko said, it glowed and it was transparent and vague, although its long hair was in the way and you couldn't see its face clearly. But if it were Migiwa, then she could probably see. Her pupil dilated. Maybe it was the reflection of the moon which caused Migiwa's eye to look like it gave off a phosphorescent light. Or perhaps it was her Sans undertale power. Even if you can deceive a novice, you won't be able to deceive the second sight of Migiwa, Suten no Onikiri. The Suten no Onikiri. That name didn't mean anything to me, but maybe that was Migiwa's true identity. Even among all this ruckus, everyone kept sleeping. She looked at each of them in turn and finally let out a low murmur. Detective Mikiwa is about to announce the identity of the culprit. Chat, if you have any guesses about who is among us, then I suggest you make them now. The uncanny blue eye of Migiwa looked down coldly at one of the sleeping girls. My eyes followed where her hard gaze was looking. Among the uncanny cold air where the girls were sleeping, there was just one that was as white as a Western doll. She looked like a doll, but maybe it was that she was just a vessel who had momentarily lost its soul. The vampire that had the appearance of a young girl didn't answer. I didn't have any techniques to determine whether or not this was really Yasumi. If this was her in consciousness, then the consciousness of the Yasumi I knew was likely deeply buried, knowing nothing about this. Migiwa held her vermilion pole in the middle and walked towards the other side of the room. Like holding a cane, she gripped one end while the other was in the middle, and she slowly pulled both hands apart. A silvery light gleamed in the dark from the pole that had parted, and a sharp blade appeared. I suppose it's not too late to just switch over to the Migiwa route if Yasumi dies. Migiwa had said this, that she was the Shuten no Onikiri. Migiwa had said that swords were vessels where gods resided. Therefore, to face an Oni that she should slay instead of the small Fry Morio, she had this prepared in advance. Was Mikiwa planning on slaying the vampire that she declared was Yasumi? Mikiwa asked me the opposite question. I knew that, but if she cuts Yasumi down, then she'll never... I couldn't put my thoughts into words. I couldn't say them. In the world that Migiwa lived in, her words were definitely correct. But even then, I wanted to speak out. She said that in a light, jovial voice, but I knew it wasn't a joke, and I was struck by her words. This is one of my favorite developments. If Mikiwa said so much, then it wasn't a joke. The vampire really was Yasumi. Then if Yasumi was about to be cut down, Migiwa held the hidden sword that she pulled from the red handle and headed towards Yasumi's spirit while weaving her body. Chanting a prayer to the god of war, she closed the distance and made a circular strike downward. It started out slowly and then gathered speed at the end. And the completely revealed blade made a large arc. Yasumi's spirit was in its radius and would surely be struck. So, now, I wonder exactly what you'd like to do. Would you like to jump in and protect her? I thought you might. I like the way that they've worded these choices, by the way. Come forward to protect or just looking at. But we are going to jump forward to protect the vampire. Using Komochi as a shield, I jumped into the range of that whirlwind attack. Metal and Tsubaki wood collided. Right before the impact, I saw that it was a real blade and stiffened my shoulders, bracing myself as the blow resounded through me. I think the chill running through my body was because I thought Komochi would break and the blade would slice into me. But the virtuous wooden sword didn't snap in two and stopped the blade, allowing it to only pierce a few millimeters. Exhaling a short breath, Migiwa immediately returned the blade to its sheath. She didn't leave the blade exposed. Maybe it was a style to close to Yaido, where the sword is quickly drawn from a sitting position. The chill down my back was replaced by the warmth of the heart pumping blood as fast as possible, and sweat ran across my skin. Fortunately, it wasn't really visible, and I glared at Migiwa, hiding any sign of my weakness. I do love how Shoko, regardless of circumstances, is always like, oh my god, did you break a law? Did you break a rule? Are you a rule breaker? She's such a dork. But her blue eye that saw Oni transfixed me and told me that even still she wouldn't let it escape. She held the pole and pointed the end towards me as she said that. With only that parting word, Migiwa narrowed her sharp eyes, and the tip of the vermilion pole at her side. Hyun, 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 hyun. The mysterious pliant pole started slowly and gradually spinning. Though the area she held didn't move, the tip drew a circle. In the blue darkness, the metal gleamed in the moonlight and burned an after image in my eyes as a golden circle appeared. The alluring, shining golden ring really was like an unblinking eye of a snake chasing after its prey. If I didn't have any prior knowledge of this technique, I might have been taken in by it, but I already knew of this. It was basically a technique that used circular movement to throw an opponent off balance. The deciding factor was that the opponent would get irritated and try a big move and then be disarmed by a kendo like makiwaza. And in the next instant, the pole would probably give a nasty strike to the opponent whose weapon had gone flying. If you knew about a makiwaza coming, you could counter it by gripping down hard and letting the opponent's weakened makiwaza flow by. If she quietly prepared and then suddenly used it, I might not have countered it, but her preliminary movements were easy to see. The pliancy was different from a bamboo sword, as well as the contact and strength, but if you knew of it, you could easily counter it. She said it jokingly, but the look in her eyes didn't relax. Interesting that she decided to call the Kinky the Rook. The Rook, a piece whose role is attacking. Constantly attacking with one-handed specialties. It was the nickname of Natsume-san, the women's kendo champion in Japan. One side of her mouth lifted into a grin as she said that in a mocking voice. That technique won't work on her anymore. Hugh. The golden ring of the snake eyes stopped its intimidating sound for a moment and then started again, more high-pitched. Hey, do you ever explain the stroke count and the way that you write the name of your secret technique as you say it while you're using it? The perverse Amano-jaku. Lappy, what are some of your special attacks that you're always explaining to people as you use them? The path of the rotating tip spun in the other direction. Mingiwa sounded confident that doing just that meant something. Her stance didn't reverse, so from what I could tell, there weren't really any changes other than that. Ah yes, Big Bunny attack. But something was different. As I searched for the secret by staring at the pole, Mingiwa's piercing blue right eye caught my attention. I wondered if it was her killing intent, since I felt a cold steel run down my back even before Komochi received the first blow. It must be her killing intent, because she hadn't moved. She announced that she was going to move in, and the middle tip drew back slightly in preparation. The next instant, it came and struck at my throat. She had purposefully declared her attack, but I could see it was coming. I should be able to dodge. Mingiwa's pole, which I should have been able to dodge, lightly grazed my neck. I couldn't dodge her attack. It wasn't that Mingiwa used her pole any differently or faster than before. It was just that I couldn't move. If Mingiwa didn't miss on purpose, my throat would have been crushed. Yes, this really was like being paralyzed. I wasn't afraid of Mingiwa, and my intent to get in her way had lessened. By the way, I'm not sure what the vampire is doing during all of this time, but my legs were planted on the ground and couldn't move, just as when a snake pins a frog with its glare. In the world of sword-fighting novels, there's the Ingetsu Sappo, which hypnotizes the opponent by drawing a half circle. Mingiwa, with that uncanny luster in her blue eye, looked away from me, who couldn't move, and turned her gaze to the vampire. Alright. So now do we try and persuade Mingiwa? Or do we call out to Yasumi? I wonder, should we call to Yasumi? Or should we plead with Mingiwa once more? Will Mingiwa relent if we plead more strongly? Or will Yasumi wake up if we call out to her? Well, Lappy, let's see what happens. When you choose the correct option to continue on Yasumi's route. I screamed. Since I couldn't stand between Mingiwa and Yasumi, I could only scream. If my voice wouldn't reach Mingiwa, maybe I could reach Yasumi instead. If Yasumi weren't aware of this, then maybe when she woke up, the vampire would vanish. in order to stay here, Migiwa couldn't expose herself by killing a person, so if the ghost disappeared, I could buy a little bit of time. So, in order to wake Yasumi, or at least someone else, I started yelling. Yes, yes. Intentional vampirism. Let's go for it. Migiwa followed her own set of values and cut my words in two. I knew that she had no intention of listening. But even so, I wasn't going to give up. I'd bought a little time, but Yasumi still wasn't waking up. If my words couldn't reach her, then I had no choice but to try and physically shake her to see if she would wake. The Jano Mei had bound my legs. Whether it was hypnotism or something else, I don't know, but the cause should have been something like that. Though her technique and abilities were different from that of an average person, Migiwa wasn't an Oni but a human like myself. Something like acupuncture, which was my grandpa's livelihood, would also look like magic to someone who didn't know anything about it. A needle. That cold feeling earlier that entered my body, which I thought was her killing intent. In my exposed thigh, I saw a thin silver line that shone in the pale moonlight. It was a needle that was spit from the mouth or something like that. Anyway, that was the cause of my condition. So, rotating the pole in the other direction was just the eloquent Migiwa's way of distracting me from her sleight of hand. I pulled out the needle with shaking fingers and lunged towards Yasumi. I didn't head towards the vampire that Migiwa was about to cut down, but towards the body of Yasumi, which wouldn't wake up. And using all my strength, I picked her up and then headed towards the vampire. It's obvious what I'm doing. I headed towards the spirit that had spilled out and collided with it while holding Yasumi's body. The moment I touched Yasumi's spirit, I felt power leaving from my body. It was being drained away. Like how a cup of tea cools or a ball rolls down an incline, the energy gradually naturally shifted away from me. My power was being drained. But as if that were the last bit of energy that Yasumi's unconsciousness sought, just as her body touched her spirit, her body in my arms opened its eyes and she looked right and left as if to confirm where she was. I also thought I did something reckless just then. I touched Yasumi when I didn't know how much energy was going to be drained away from me, just as Migiwa had said. But I normally have bad luck, but maybe I was just saving it up for times like this. Yasumi, who was standing on the tatami mat, oh dear, with both legs, noticed Migiwa, who was looking this way with a complicated expression on her face. Her gaze stopped at Migiwa's hand, which was holding an unfamiliar vermilion pole. That was the sheath that held a hidden blade, which had been about to cut Yasumi down. Her face returned to that of cold Onikiri as Migiwa stared at us. Though everyone was magically asleep, they were still here in this room, so she shouldn't be able to cut down a living person. I hid Yasumi behind the shadow of my back, and I took a step forward. I didn't plan on being caught by either types of Ja no Mei anymore. I wasn't going to step back or allow Yasumi to be killed. Against my straight-on glare, Migiwa let it slide, just past her, like her fighting techniques.
睨み合っても時間の無駄だし、こうしてる間に本命に逃げられたら目も当てられないわ。
Following her gaze, her body turned around and she put her back towards us.
どこに？さっきの場所に戻るのよ。
I interrupted her original task and dragged her all the way here. I felt bad about that, but protecting Yasumi, Mikiwa probably also felt the same way.
私に後ろめたいところなんてないから、逃げも隠れもしないわよ。あんたたちがここにいる以上、これからも顔を合わせるわ。だけどこれからご飯だけは別に食べた方がいいかもね。あんたたちが美味しく食べるためにも、私の健康のためにも。
With those parting words, as if it'd be a shame to be poisoned, Mikiwa left the room.
誰が一服持ったりするか。
And I think this is actually where we will call it for tonight. We've hit, I know it hasn't flipped over to the next day yet, but we are actually just 2 days from the end of Yasumi's route. And also that means we are extremely close, because the last 2 days are pretty quick, if we remember how they go. And some of the things will be the same as we saw in Mikiwa's route as well. So please enjoy now. Looking forward to next week, where we can talk to Yasumi about, how she's a ghost vampire and discover even more opportunities for Yuri Vampirism. Until then, thank you everyone for joining me tonight, and I bid you good night and farewell.